Welcome to the Stillhouse Reflections, a quiet space to step outside the noise and consider what's real, what's yours, and what freedom can mean in everyday life. Hey folks, it's Della. Welcome back to the Stillhouse Reflections. So I want to talk about something fun today. We're going to talk about human rules versus natural truth and what the differences are. So human rules is sort of a term that I made up that describes things like human morality, ideas around right and wrong, good and bad, belonging versus acceptance, obligation versus responsibility, approval or lack of, those kinds of things. All of those constructs, they're human rules. Money is a human construct, right? Religion is a human construct. They're human rules. They're human ideas. They're made up things that humans invented really as a means of controlling each other. As a means of creating cohesion, as a means of creating society, right? There are some very natural human tendencies that people have, right? The need to belong and fit in is a very natural human feeling. It's a human idea, right? It's very natural and normal for people to want to feel like they fit in or belong to a group, right? Having a society built on moral cohesion is also very much a human idea. Moral cohesion made it easy for people, for governments and systems to implement laws. When we all agree that stealing is bad, regardless of why, then it's easy to implement punishment. That's the idea behind those human rules. But those human rules aren't based on natural truth. They aren't based on universal truth. They aren't even based on religion. They aren't based on anything other than human ego. There are very few universal laws. There are very few universal truths. And so if we were to build a society around universal truth, what would it look like? It would look like radical freedom because there is complete acceptance. God is the God of all that is, if you believe in God. If you don't, just ignore this part. But God is the God of all that is. God is not the God of all that's good. So God created a spectrum of experience, right? There was a spectrum of experience. What you and I view as sort of joy, really, really good, love, and then despair, sadness, pain, hate on the other side, and a whole spectrum of things in between. A whole range of emotions and types of experience in the middle. God didn't have the human judgment of those as being right and wrong, good and bad. God may have had some idea of wanted and unwanted. There may have been an awareness that, well, humans probably aren't going to like this and they're probably going to love that. Right? There's that going on, sure. But in order for there to be a spectrum, in order for there to be balance, you need both. The reality is that humans have a sense of duality. In order to understand hot, you need cold. In order to understand wet, you need dry. In order to understand right, you need wrong. In order to understand bad, you need good. In order to understand joy, you need sadness, and vice versa. All of those things. We have that sense of duality. That sense of duality is how we make sense of our world. It's how we understand things. We need something to hook our understanding on, right? Teachers learn this quickly. In order for people to learn something, you need to hook it to something they already know. You can't just bring in new information that floats over here by itself, right? It needs to hook on something. It needs to have something to land on in order to make sense. Because if it doesn't connect to you in some kind of a way, to your prior knowledge or to your lived experience or to your idea of things, then you're just simply, it's floating out here and you're just simply going to abandon it. It's going to go away. So in order for people to actually learn, there needs to be connection. Right? So when you're learning about wet, you connect to what dry means. When you're learning about hot, you connect to what cold means. When you're learning about up, you have to understand down. So you need to understand one in order to understand the other. So we create that relationship. That is the spectrum of experience. You need a relationship. If you lived in a world where everything that happened was from your perspective on the bad side of the spectrum, everything was painful, everything was bad, everything was negative, everything was awful, you wouldn't actually know it was awful because you wouldn't have anything to compare it to. And the same is true in the opposite. If everything that you experienced was good, was joyful, was happy, you wouldn't know it because you wouldn't have anything to compare it to. You need that spectrum of experience. You need both. God understood the humans that were being created were going to need that set of experience in order to have an understanding. They were going to need to experience opposites. They were going to need to experience spectrum in order to understand. But humans do things to themselves. Humans have what we call free will. And humans do things to themselves. Humans focus on problems. Humans focus on the pile of problems. We all have the pile of problems in the corner. I call it laundry. We all have it. Everybody has it. But a lot of times we spend all of our energy focusing on those problems on the laundry because we think it's going to jump out at us if we don't. We think something bad's going to happen if we don't stand guard and watch the problems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Human focus, the way humans are taught to think about life, the way humans are taught to focus on problems, the way humans are taught to fix things, meaning if there's a problem, I need to fix it. I can't just leave it there. We don't do that with happy. We don't do that with joy. We don't do that with things we consider good. We have sayings like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? We don't want to tinker with good. Right? But bad we hone in on. It's like bees to honey. That creates sabotage. We sabotage ourselves that way. Because we take the joy out of an otherwise good experience. Did you have a bad 5 minutes or did you have a bad day? Did you have a bad day or did you have a bad week? Did you have a bad week or did you have a bad life? What are you paying attention to? Human rules, morality, religion, right and wrong, good and bad, how it's supposed to be, what it should look like, all of that the should and supposed tos of the world, all of those ideas force you into thinking that you need to fix bad and eradicate bad. We need to get rid of everything that's bad. Right? So like if we were somehow magically able to stop people from killing each other, if we were magically able to fix a problem in the world, remove an experience of like murder or death, if we were able to remove that experience, you have to understand that there's still an emotional spectrum in play. The emotional spectrum that humans have, from joy to pain or grief, despair, mirrors and parallels the spectrum of experience that we have. Even if we take away an experience off of one end of that spectrum, we still have the emotion, because you can't get rid of the emotion. So people are just going to feel more strongly about what we would think of to be lesser experiences. Right now, you would think of it almost as an overreaction. But really all it is people using experience to feel. The feeling is going to happen anyway, regardless of what the experience is that triggers it. So we could remove every experience that one considered to be bad, right? We could lop off the entire end of the spectrum of experience and remove everything that we consider to be negative and only be left with things that we consider good. But the human emotional spectrum would remain the same, and it would simply fit into that new spectrum of experience that we have, and you would still feel the equal amounts of joy and pain that we do now. It would just relate to different types of experiences. Because humans are naturally built to feel those things. Eradicating the experience does not eradicate the feeling. We're simply going to use different experiences to feel the same things. So those human rules around right and wrong, they're kind of irrelevant. They don't really matter because it doesn't change the emotional effect. The experiences are still going to have emotions, and the emotional spectrum is still going to be there. So the human rules that have been created to prevent experience doesn't really change anything. Preventing the experience doesn't prevent the emotion. Natural universal law says experience and everything just is. Now, some of that is philosophical. We call it existentialism. But the philosophical idea that experience just is means the experience was created from a neutral standpoint. God is a neutral, omnipotent being, not as someone with anger management issues, not as someone out to punish. Right? What did religion do? Religion took God, an omnipotent being, an all-loving being, but then there was experience that was bad, that they didn't like. So instead of attributing the bad experiences to the God, and make the God of all that is, we needed cops and robbers. So we invented the devil. And we attributed bad experiences to the devil and good experiences to God, and that's how we got where we are. But really, the universe is neutral. It's neutral. When the lion kills another animal to eat for dinner, you don't say that's awful. The universe created animals to kill each other for food. If the universe was against murder, then that wouldn't be a thing. So clearly it's neutral. The horses don't look at the sheep and go, "You're awful." Horses don't look at pigs and say, "Why do you roll around in the mud? You're crazy." They don't do that. They don't have judgment of each other. Right? That's a human construct. But the difference is, at least with animals, we have some acceptance. We kind of look at dogs and cats and pigs and horses and sheep and whatever, and we kind of go, well, they just are. We have a little bit of that. We're able to do that to some degree. We don't try to change that. But with humans, we do. With humans, we try to make people the same. We try to get conformity through coercion, through punishment, through judgment, through fear. And we use human rules to do it. Right? So the truth of the universe, the truth of God, if you believe in one, was manipulated into control. It's used as a reason to control people, to get people to believe the same things and conform to a way of being in the world. Right? And then the fear of what happens if you don't do that means you'll obey. You'll follow the rules. To some degree. Is that hard and fast? Does it work every time? No. No, we have rules against murder, but people kill each other all the time. We have rules against speeding, but everybody speeds. We have laws that says you're supposed to stop at the stop sign. People don't do that either. Right? There are all kinds of rules. Most people kind of half follow. So rules don't really solve it, do they? They don't really work. They're changeable. Once people get past consequences, they kind of do what they're going to do anyway. Fear of punishment doesn't really stop people either, does it? It's that. So what would happen if you removed all the human constructs? What would happen if you remove the human rules? Judgment and fear and morality and all the things. What would happen if you removed all the human rules and just let people live? Most people believe it would be chaos. And I agree to a point. If you did that in our society right now, which makes people fend for survival because of manufactured lack and scarcity, yes, it probably would descend into chaos. But if you created a world where people didn't have to struggle to survive, where food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education were all freely provided for everybody, and then said, okay, you don't have to fight for survival, that's off the table. Now you get to do whatever you want, make your own radical choices, build a life you actually want. Then removing the human rules wouldn't have the catastrophic effect that you think it would. Because people wouldn't be clawing for survival, for resources, for food. Nobody would be homeless. There would be no poverty. Nobody would be struggling to eat. And they wouldn't have to take a job they don't want just because they can't afford to go to school. That. Human rules create control, but it distorts truth. Because people can't really live their truth when they're struggling to simply survive. And we can do better. We can do better than that. We can create a different system. Take survival off the table. And free people from the human rules, which are all just lies anyway. None of that stuff is true. Our perception of reality is like a funhouse mirror. It's a distorted mirror. It's a warped, colored, distorted mirror. We don't see clearly because we filter everything through our own belief systems, our own sets of morality, our own lived experience and pain. Everything gets filtered through this warp, which means we don't see truth clearly necessarily. It's always filtered through a lens of pain. And when you're highly attached to moral ideologies and beliefs, that distorts it even further. When you're highly attached to ideas around right and wrong, it distorts it further. Because immediately an experience happens and you've already determined whether it's right and wrong before you've even had a thought in your head. There is an immediate innate judgment that occurs before you've even had a conscious thought. And when we look at reality, we can very clearly say that not all marriages are happy and not all funerals are sad. The idea, the blanket idea of marriage as good and funerals as bad is a human rule. So you're made to feel guilty when the marriage doesn't make you happy and the funeral doesn't make you sad. That's human rules. It's a preconditioned, pre-programmed response that you're supposed to have to certain types of experiences, and if you don't have that, there's something wrong with you. It's not true. Two people can watch exactly the same movie and have two completely different reactions to the same movie. Have two completely different judgments of the same movie. Two completely different ideas of the same movie. You can sit side by side in the movie theater. That's human perspective. That's perception at play. And it shows you blatantly how different and varied human experience and human perception can be. And instead of accepting that, we try to make people conform to this is how you should see this event. This is how you should see this thing. And then we take surveys to prove it. We go around and we poll people. 53% of people said this movie sucked. So now everybody's supposed to think it sucked because 53% did. And so to conform now, you can't like the movie either. Those are human rules. that make you conform to things that aren't true for you. I'm not offering you the idea that we should go out there and create anarchy. We're not breaking rules just to break rules. What I want you to do is get clear on where the rules are helpful and where the rules create more pain than they solve. And there are plenty of places in life where the rules, the perception of how it should be or how it's supposed to be, creates more pain than how it is. Learning to leave the experience as it is and just accept it as a thing that happens is how we move away from trying to control the experience to make it fit in the box of how we think things should be, or what we think should be happening or is supposed to be happening. It's how we get out of that. It's not easy to do, but that's the job. As I've worked through my own stuff and continued to question my own perspective, and to find truth, because I was going for truth. What's actually true? Not necessarily what my truth is, although I've had to do that too. But from a broader place, this is how the world generally sees this thing. Is that actually true? And really look at those things. Really understand, maybe those rules that we have aren't necessarily the most helpful things in the world. And maybe if we left more experiences alone to just be as they are, we create fewer difficulties for ourselves. I see it now as humans create more problems than they ultimately solve, and they actually put a lot more pain into experience than the experience would offer them if left alone on its own. Humans create their own struggle a lot of the time. Society is built on creating struggle. The entire thing is built on creating struggle. And human rules don't help that. Moving back towards natural law, moving back towards just letting things be as they are, and moving away from human rules and control will allow people to find truth and fulfillment and radical freedom in a way that they haven't before. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. And I'll see you on the next Stillhouse Reflections. Bye for now. Thanks for spending this time with me. May these reflections stay with you and keep opening new ways of seeing until we meet again at the Stillhouse.